detail.
And while we're on the topic, so that I can move a little faster, what about items being on a schedule? Was everything he did through OAG or personally reflected on a schedule?
No.
Is the schedule supposed to contain the comings and goings of the Attorney General?
More generally, yes.
Why is that?
For the assistance of DPS specifically, I would provide a 2-week outlook on the schedule so that they could understand where appointments were, what time, who their POC was at that place and time, so that they could coordinate security efforts.
And were there occasions in which Mr. Paxton's plans were not contained on his schedule?
Yes.
Specifically related to Nate Paul?
Yes.
How do you know that?
Because I managed the schedule.
Did you have concerns about that at the time?
No.
At some point, did it become concerning enough to you for you to speak to a supervisor?
Yes.
Who was your supervisor?
Blake Brickman.
And why would you go to Blake Brickman about such a concern?
I was receiving some new requests in terms of both transportation as well as documentation and scheduling, and I was trying to understand the best way to handle that with my boss, who is General Paxton.
Okay. I'm going to return you back to the Omni. On one occasion, were you there with your family?
Yes.
Can you quickly tell the Senate why you were there and for how long?
My family had come down for a weekend. I don't recall if there was any sort of special significance for that occasion. They were down there to stay there for the weekend. General Paxton was also there at that time due to the renovations being conducted on his home, and they were staying down there, and I chose to stay with them for the time that they were at that hotel as well.
Did you have occasion to see Ken Paxton while you were there?
I did run into him, yes.
Can you please tell us about that?
My mom and sister had gone up to the hotel room. My father and I had run back to my apartment downtown. Upon returning to the Omni Hotel and entering the lobby, we turned right to go into the elevators. We had pushed the button and were waiting on the elevators, and on the other side of the door, my father and I heard a lively discussion. Just to be clear, not adversarial, just lively. And whenever the doors opened, 2 individuals exited. One was General Paxton. He was in workout attire, and he told us that he was going to the gym. The other individual was in a dress and high heels and exited rather quickly. General Paxton walked out, shook my hand as well as my father's. We spoke for a moment, and then he told us he was going to work out.
Was there anyone else on the elevator for which that lively conversation could have included?
No.
And what, if anything, did you notice about the dynamic between the two, if anything at all?
I couldn't overhear the conversation, but whenever they exited, she quickly exited the elevator, and that was the only time I really saw them interact in person.
Did that cause any concern for you or questions?
It did spur some questions.
And who would you have directed those questions to?
I reached out to Mark Rylander about that.
And why did you reach out to Mark Rylander?
Prior to coming to the office of the Attorney General, I had been informed that there had been...
Objection, hearsay. Sustained.
Did you have reason to think, whether true or not true on the part of Mr. Rylander, this might be something of interest to him?
Objection. Yes. Again, Your Honor, she's just trying to ask a different way. This is based on hearsay. Overruled.
Did you have any reason to think this might be of interest to him?
Yes.
And was it?
Yes.
Did he seem to understand who it was you had seen?
Yes.
Did you receive a photograph to confirm?
Yes.
Now, I'm not going to show you the same photograph, but I am going to show you a person. Would you be able to tell me if this was the person that you saw in the elevator?
Yes.
May I approach? So used to government work, I forget we have technology. Can I turn everyone's attention to 704? And Stacy, would you pull up the photograph, please? Do you recognize the person in this picture, whether you know her name or not?
I do.
For purposes of the record, the person being depicted in the photograph is Laura Olson, as established by her Texas driver's license. Thank you, Stacy. May I have 699? Next, Your Honor, the House offers Exhibit 699. It is a business record as established by the affidavit on the face. I'm confident that the page count will match this time, as there's no substantial photographs, and it has been on record for over 14 days. And it is being admitted by agreement, as I understand it.
Any objection?
No objection, Your Honor.
Admit Exhibit 699 into evidence.
Now, Mr. Wicker, I'm not going to have you do this, but inside of an apartment complex application, would it explain where you have lived before and where you're going to live now? I know that didn't make sense. Are you aware of the fact that application leases will establish your prior address as well as your current one?
Yes,
And is the name on that record the same as the driver's license, Laura Olson?
it is.
Is that the woman that you saw step off the elevator with Ken Paxton?
It is.
You mentioned home renovations. Do you remember why those renovations were occurring?
There were storms late spring that caused water damage to General Paxton's Austin home.
Okay. I don't want you to give the address, but could you give us the street name so that we're all familiar with the fact that we're speaking about the same thing?
Margarinita Crescent.
So you said spring. Do you recall what month the damage occurred in?
This probably would have occurred March, April timeframe.
Okay. And do you know where the damage was?
To the best of my recollection, it was confined to the master bedroom.
Why would you know that?
I met with the insurance adjuster multiple times at the request of General Paxton while he was out of town or in other meetings.
So there were occasions where you were authorized on his behalf to conduct personal business, for example, the adjustment of the insurance.
I was authorized to greet the insurance adjuster and show them the home.
Does that mean you would sometimes also receive records related to the home renovation?
I can only think of one occurrence in which that happened.
And what was that?
I received an invoice that I had been included on from the STEAM team.
And are you aware, as the adjuster, that there are some renovations that were done pursuant to the water damage itself and covered by insurance?
I would assume so, yes.
Okay. I'm going to turn everyone's attention to House Exhibit 703. Again, it's a business record. It's Cupertino Builders. There's a business record affidavit, and it's been on file for over 14 days.
Any objection?
No, sir.
Admit 703 into evidence.
Stacy, would you please pull up the face of the email that's attached? Mr. Wicker, do you recognize the name of the individual who sent the email?
Kevin Wood.
And who is Kevin Wood?
Kevin Wood was the lead contractor at the Paxton's home renovation.
Is he someone that you met personally?
He is.
How many times did you see or speak with Kevin Wood?
At least a half dozen.
And do you see that on the to line is the name Raj Kumar?
I see yes, I do.
And moving down further, do you see that Nate Paul was N Paul at worldclass.com was the person who emailed Kevin Wood?
I do.
Where is that? What are we looking at?
Is the body of that email related to home items or repairs, things that need to be done?
It would appear so, yes.
I'm going to have Stacy then turn to the first couple of pictures in the file. Can we see the next? Does anything about the home being depicted look familiar to you?
Several of these images do appear to be, that's the Paxton's dining room.
Are you wondering or are you sure?
No, I'm positive.
Thank you. On how many occasions were you at the Margranita home in the summer of 2020 during renovations?
During the renovations, half dozen.
Okay. And do you recall any times that you were present where Kevin Wood and Ken Paxton were both there?
I do.
I'm going to turn your attention to a conversation about the kitchen. Do you recall whether or not there was any damage to that area of the home?
I do not.
Would it make sense then that these are things external to insurance coverage?
It would make sense.
Is that an area of the home that you ever discussed in regards to being an adjuster or assisting the adjuster, rather?
Not to my recollection.
Okay. Can you walk us through any conversations you overheard between Kevin Wood and Ken Paxton?
Objection, Your Honor. Anything Kevin Wood may have said would be hearsay.
At this stage, Your Honor, it's not being offered for the truth. It's to set an anchor. I will get more specific in a moment.
Again, Your Honor, the question is very nonspecific, and anything she's going to ask about what Kevin Wood may have said is hearsay.
Your Honor, it is clear from the course of the conversation that Kevin Wood was acting as a service provider. At that point, the truth doesn't matter. At the point in which it does, it goes to his motive, intent, and plan.
Again, Your Honor, you've already... She just said what Kevin Wood said wouldn't matter. I agree. Hearsay and irrelevant.
I didn't say it ultimately wouldn't matter, Your Honor. It will matter very much.
Sustain.
Did you get an idea as to what the relationship was between Ken Paxton and Kevin Wood?
Kevin Wood was the lead contractor on General Paxton's home.
And if Mr. Paxton then wanted additional things or changes to the renovation, whom would he speak with?
Kevin Wood.
Is there any other way Mr. Paxton would find out the timing of renovations or the duration of renovations or the cost of renovations other than Kevin Wood?
Objection, compound, and speculation. She is asking what Ken Paxton would do and what he would know. That's pure speculation.
It's an operative fact, Your Honor. There's no other way for him to know it.
Again, she just asked what Ken Paxton might know. That's speculation.
I'm going to overrule. You can answer if you know.
Not to my knowledge.
I don't even remember the question at this point, frankly. I might have to read it back. At any point, were there conversations about changes to the property?
Yes.
Isn't that the entire point of a contractor?
Yes.
And at any point, were there discussions about particular items in the home?
Yes.
Would what matters to you be whether a counter is granted or not, or whether the renovations are occurring at this stage?
Objection, vague, and relevance.
Did you care what his countertops were made of?
Again, Your Honor, what does it matter whether young Drew Wicker cares about the countertops? It's irrelevant.
Overrule.
Did you care what the countertops were made of?
No.
Did anything about a conversation related to countertops concern you?
Objection, hearsay.
It is not being offered for the truth of the matter asserted. There's no statement. It asks if he overheard something he was concerned about.
She just asked for hearsay right there, Your Honor. That's hearsay.
No, Your Honor, it goes to state of mind.
Overruled.
Thank you. At some point, did you hear something that concerned you?
Yes.
What was that?
Objection, hearsay.
Your Honor, there's three places. One, nucleus of operative facts, because it goes to the center of this. Specific to hearsay, it goes to state of mind. There's no other way for General Paxton to know how long something is going to take or what it will cost other than speaking to his contractor. And finally, it goes to Drew Wicker's state of mind in regards to what he does next because of what he heard, whether the statement is true or not.
Your Honor, we need to know who she's talking about was speaking. I think she's trying to elicit testimony about what this man heard a contractor say who has been subpoenaed and who could come here and testify. This is not the right witness for that.
I'm going to overrule. You're not saying it's the truth of the matter, just the statement was made.
That's at this point, Your Honor. Mr. President, thank you. What did you hear that concerned you?
Kevin Wood stated that he would check with Nate on several of the items.
Now, was that about how long something would take or when something would be delivered?
No, sir. No, ma'am. It was with regards to cost.
Now, if Kevin Wood's a contractor who's trying to make money on his own, why would he need to check with anyone?
Objection, speculation.
Sustained.
So let's back up a little bit. What would he have to check with Nate on specifically? Please tell us in detail what you recall.
He was stating that he would need to check with Nate on the cost of countertops and renovations to the cabinetry in the kitchen.
I'm going to be very specific. Did he have to check on the cost, or did he have to check on, did Mr. Wood seem to already understand what the cost would be?
Yes.
And what was the cost?
He mentioned the total of $20,000
For what?
for the cabinetry and the countertops.
And what was Ken Paxton's response? That he wanted to do it or did not want to do it?
He stated that he would like to move forward.
And then what was said by Kevin Wood?
He said, I would check with Nate.
Did you relay that conversation to anyone?
I related to two individuals.
Were either of them people who worked above you at the Office of the Attorney General?
Yes.
Were you relaying the information to be salacious or for another reason?
I was seeking advice.
And who did you speak to?
I spoke to Mark Rylander and Blake Brickman.
What did Mark Rylander or Blake Brickman advise you to do?
Objection, hearsay.
Your Honor,
Sustained.
Okay. What did you do after speaking to Mark Rylander and Blake Brickman?
I spoke to General Paxton.
What did you say to Mr. General Paxton?
I asked him about the conversation that I'd overheard, and I stated that I walked away with a certain impression.
Let me pause you. With what impression?
I walked away with the impression that Nate Paul was involved in the renovations of General Paxton's home.
What concerns did you have about that?
Given the fact that we were working on several items related to Mr. Paul, it felt as though there might be an inappropriate relationship there.
Were you that clear with the general?
Yes.
And what happened?
He stated that he appreciated me bringing his concern to him, and that he then assured me that that was in fact not the case.
Did his explanation absolve all concerns?
No.
How did you feel at the conclusion of that conversation?
Still uneasy, but I never discussed it after that with him.
Okay. Are you aware of the fact that we've issued subpoenas for Kevin Wood for him to address these issues and that he does not intend to testify before this court?
Objection, speculation. She's just testifying now.
Sustained.
Did you spend much time at the Paxton home after that?
Not much, no.
Why not?
It was a mix of ongoing renovations, increased travel, and just lack of requests to be there.
Did you feel comfortable about the home or being present at the home?
Not always, no.
Why is that?
There were still some lingering concerns over the questions that I had asked the general, but I had not followed up on those concerns.
In the summer of 2020, prior to the whistleblowing allegations, did you have an opinion as to the veracity or the truthfulness of Mark Penley?
Yes.
And what was it?
He seemed to be an individual of the utmost integrity.
And did you have an opinion as to the credibility or truthfulness of Jeff Mateer?
Yes.
I'm sorry, it's not proper for one witness to talk about whether another witness is truthful. That's just not how it works.
It absolutely is, Your Honor.
Please let me finish and quit interrupting, please. Your Honor, it's not proper for one witness to sit up on the stand and say, this person's truthful, that's not how it works. It's improper. I object.
He's absolutely right in a vacuum. I would have no authority to talk about the character of truthfulness as a primary rule, and I wouldn't infringe it. But once he attacks their credibility, Rule 405A1 allows me to establish by reputation or opinion a relevant character trait. In this case, truthfulness.
That's not how it works, Your Honor.
Yes, it is.
Anyway, this is not how it works, Your Honor. You don't get to get up here and bring one witness and talk about the veracity of all the other witnesses. Now, if she feels like Mr. Penley's veracity was challenged on some particular statement, then she brings a different statement to try to rehabilitate him. But she don't do it with this witness.
You could do it with any witness, Your Honor.
Will sustain the objection.
How did you communicate with Ken Paxton in 2020?
Through email and text message and phone calls.
How many cell phones did Ken Paxton have?
He had 2 primary, and he later obtained 2 more cell phones.
I learned through the course of opening that I used the term burner phone incorrectly. Apparently, they have to be cheap and from 7-Eleven. What would you call extra phones that most people don't know about?
Extra phones?
Okay, so two primary phones, 2 extra phones.
Yes, ma'am.
Do you have the phone number of his personal phone?
I do.
And would you give us the last 4 digits of that, please?
The cell phone is 8128.
And what about his work phone?
0220.
Can you describe for us physically what the other 2 phones look like?
The other 2 phones being the extra phones?
That's correct.
Okay. The other 2 phones, one was a Samsung Galaxy Fold, the other was a red iPhone.
You mentioned that you also communicated with him by email. Outside of work email, did he have another?
He did.
What kind of account was that?
It was a Proton mail.
And do you know how the Proton account was set up?
It was set up through the OAG's office.
Why was that?
We went to China.
So it was safer to discuss business on that phone than it would be for a Chinese hacker to get into a personal cell or a work cell, correct?
Yes.
But do you also know that their headquarters are out of the United States?
I believe they're in Switzerland.
And so they wouldn't be subsequent to a search warrant and are not provided as part of a public records request to the OAG.
Objection, speculation, Your Honor.
Sustain.
And are you familiar with something called Signal?
I am.
What is that?
It is an encrypted messaging app.
Encrypted, also making it safer, correct?
Yes.
Are you aware that they too are housed out of the country, not subsequent to, are not under the pressures of a subpoena and not provided by the OAG?
Again, Your Honor, this is just her testifying what she thinks Signal is. This witness doesn't know this. It's speculation and improper.
Sustained.
At any point, did General Paxton ask to use technology that you provided?
Yes.
What was that?
He used my personal cell phone.
How many times did the general use your personal cell phone?
At least 3 to 4.
Were you able to hear those conversations or who they were with?
I was not.
Were you able to determine after you got your property back why he needed your phone?
No.
Why not?
Whenever I received my cellular device back, the call log had been wiped.
And did he use anything of yours other than your cell phone?
No.
Do you recall after the whistleblowers, Mr. Paxton asking to use your laptop?
Yes.
What was that about?
That was a request. He was working on a letter to the Inspector General of the United States.
Can you anchor that in time for us? What had just occurred?
This was late October, and this would have been after the whistleblower complaint.
And do you know, what were you asked to do?
I was asked, General Paxton handed me a hard copy of a document and asked me to transcribe the events outlined in the document in the form of a letter to the Inspector General.
And by hard copy, you mean like what I have here?
Yes.
So not handwriting, but typed written?
Yes.
Why would you need to be provided a typed written copy of anything that's already in electronic format?
Objection, speculation.
Overruled.
Why would you need to be provided a hand copy of anything that's already in electronic format?
I don't know.
And what were you asked to do? Transcribe, you said?
Yes.
Were you making additions or deletions?
I did make several additions, yes.
What kind of additions?
Since it was asked to be in the format of a letter to Inspector General Horowitz, it was addressed to Inspector General Horowitz. There was a slight introduction that I'd been asked to include, and then the sign-off was asked to be as General Paxton.
At this time, I offer House Exhibit 573. This is part of the Office of the Attorney General records. There is a business record affidavit. It has been on file for greater than 14 days.
Any objection?
Do we know about this? No objection, Your Honor.
Please admit Exhibit 573 into evidence.
Mr. Wicker, will you take a moment and look at the body of that letter and let me know if you recognize it?
This is the letter that I was asked to write for Inspector General Horowitz.
So if I turn you to the top where you add Dear Mr. Horowitz, you typed that in.
Yes.
Do you know who that is?
He was or is the Inspector General of the United States.
We've heard about the Office of the Inspector General throughout this trial. Do you know whether or not that's the appropriate person to go to if you want to make complaints about federal prosecutors or federal agents?
That is my understanding, yes.
At any point prior to the whistleblow situation, had Ken Paxton talked to you about or in your presence about the Office of the Attorney General?
About the Office of the Attorney General, yes.
Had he ever suggested going there or that they were the correct place to bring this complaint?
He had not mentioned that to me, no.
In fact, do you know that he didn't want to take it to OIG prior to that?
Objection, speculation.
Overruled.
Do you know whether or not he wanted to take Nate Paul's complaint to the OIG prior to the whistleblowers coming forward?
I do not.
And then once you look at this letter, I'm going to turn you down to the bottom in regards to the allegations made by Nate Paul, and I'm going to go quickly. Did these amount to things like not getting to use the restroom?
It did.
And when you drafted it, did you realize part of Nate Paul's big federal complaint is that he couldn't call his attorney except from using an agent's cell phone?
Yes.
And that he was not allowed to call for counsel, and that's why they provided him a cell phone?
Yes.
Are you aware that the only allegations he makes, well, let me do this differently. Where were you when you were helping type this up for the general?
This letter was written in the Office of the Attorney General.
On what laptop?
My state laptop.
And what did you do with the laptop after typing up the letter?
I followed up with General Paxton about having completed the transcribed letter.
And then what?
And I asked him what he'd like to do with it.
And what was the response?
He said that he had several insertions that he would like to make and that he would let me know about when he needed it.
Did he have you email him or put it into a USB drive?
Not to my recollection, no.
What did he do?
He asked me to bring my state laptop to his Austin home so that he could work on the letter.
And did he make changes to your knowledge?
To my knowledge, no.
Okay. Okay. After drafting the letter for the Attorney General, do you know whether or not the letter was ever sent to OIG?
I do not.
Let me turn your attention then to the conclusion of your career there. What was the status of your job?
The status was that I was both the scheduler as well as the executive aide.
Well, I mean, at the end, in October of 2020, leading into November. Were you offered a promotion? Were you offered a change in job function?
I was.
And what was that?
General Paxton had expressed an interest in myself taking on greater responsibilities with regards to certain policy areas, and that I would continue with my present job responsibilities, but also take on the additional policy-related responsibilities.
And at some point you'd mentioned that FBI had reached out to you and you make Ken Paxton aware of that. Is that accurate?
Yes.
And what did he do?
General Paxton's question that he asked me was why.
Did you have a response for him?
No, I did not.
What, if anything, did he direct you to do?
He did not direct me to do anything at that time.
Did he take you anywhere?
Not at that time, no.
Okay, ultimately, you say not at that time, so what happens next in regards to that?
The next discussion I had with a member of the AG staff regarding the FBI was Brent Webster requested to meet with me.
And what, if anything, did Brent Webster have to say on behalf of the Office of the Attorney General?
Objection, hearsay, Your Honor.
Sustained.
Was he working in his official capacity as a representative or employee of the Office of the Attorney General?
That is my understanding, yes.
Same question, Your Honor, subsequent to 801ED, which is specific to representatives or employees. Brent Webster is making the comment to Mr. Wicker in his capacity as an employee of Ken Paxton.
It's the same objection, Your Honor. We've established in this trial, you can't, that's not how it works. You cannot just come up here and ask him what somebody else said other than General Paxton himself.
You can when he's being directed as part of his employment.
He's not an employee of Ken Paxton.
He's an agent of Ken Paxton, so we'll overrule.
Thank you. What, if anything, did Brent Webster tell you?
Mr. Webster said that he understood that the FBI had reached out to me and that I should not respond.
Did he tell you why?
He said that I ran the risk of incriminating myself.
And did he then bring you back to Ken Paxton?
Eventually, yes.
What was that conversation about?
He believed that there was an opportunity to assert attorney-client privilege.
So he too wanted to prevent you from speaking to FBI?
It certainly seems that way, yes.
And were you asked to speak to anyone else about this?
Leslie French.
And what did she tell you to do?
Leslie French advised me that she had been through something similar and that there was nothing to worry about, that the AG's office would provide me with counsel while I met with the FBI, and that there was no need for me to bring my own counsel.
What was your response?
My response was that I would feel more comfortable retaining my own counsel that would look out for my interests.
Why did you respond that way?
Because that's where I would have been that's how I would have felt comfortable in that instance.
After all of this, what decision do you ultimately make about this promotion?
The conversation that occurred regarding the promotion was all at once, and this was actually, I informed General Paxton that I would not be taking the promotion, but I would gladly accept the responsibilities.
Why were you making that distinction?
I did not want the general to have the appearance of having offered me anything in light of the FBI reaching out.
So you were trying to protect the appearance of what that would look like for General Paxton?
For General Paxton and myself.
Thank you. Did you ultimately put in your notice and quit?
I did resign, yes.
Was that on November 2nd, 2020?
If I recall correctly, yes.
Makes sense then that payments would stop, is that correct?
Yes.
And did they stop from the Office of the Attorney General?
They did.
Did they stop overall?
No.
What else were you provided?
I was continued to be provided a monthly stipend by the campaign.
Did you notify Ken Paxton's campaign that you were still receiving money and that you should not be?
No, I had let them know that I was leaving and to cut off my access to both the email and the calendar, and that I should cease receiving stipends.
When did you cease receiving stipends?
Not until the following year.
And what, if anything, did you do with that extra money that you had been provided?
Michelle Smith had sent me a W-2 with that amount. I contacted her, not understanding that I continued to be paid. I asked her what I should do with the money and if General Paxton would like it back. She reached out to General Paxton, who informed her to tell me to keep it. And I stated no problem, and I went ahead and donated the money back.
They told you to keep it and you donated it back?
Yes.
Why did you do that?
I didn't do the work.
How did you feel about receiving money from Ken Paxton's campaign after you ceased employment and in light of all the facts relevant today?
I have no reason to believe that it was with malicious intent. It might have been an innocent mistake.
I think maybe more specifically, I'm talking about your character. What made you return it?
I didn't put in the work, and I did not want any instance, I didn't want it to appear as though I might have any conflict of interest if anything like this ever came about.
Thank you, sir. Pass the witness.
We're going to take a break now, and members, we went longer in this section, so we'll take a 20-minute break, and then we'll go till 12:30. We'll move lunch 12:30 to 1:30 today. So be back here at 15 minutes after 11.